A pleasure to meet all at last. And so, for this piece of the Vlog-A-Thon, I'm proud to talk a bit more about the year 2024, primarily through the months of July, August, and September of that year. And let's just say, there's a good amount of things worth discussing here. Because first off, what I got to say about July, August, and September of 2024 would have to be the fact that thyroiditis was unfortunately still a thing lingering around in my life, and so, thanks to the advice by FitTuber, which I will leave a description box link to down below, I will of course go on ahead and say that his video on curing thyroid problems permanently was exceptional. I mean, I didn't want to believe it at first because knowing the fact that there's a good amount of stuff on the web that's been considered deceptive in a way, I at least took up a few opportunities here and there and spent a bit of my time every day for a few months of my life doing the exact same things that he did. There were, of course, a couple of things I had to purchase, including the use of cold-pressed walnut oil, which I rubbed before bed. And then, of course, there was coriander seed water, in which I had to buy coriander seeds and crush them up, and then have them put in some boiling water. And then, of course, I drained them out through a sieve, and I was able to, in fact, have some coriander seed water before breakfast, much like FitTuber himself has done. I also took up the likes of yoga nidra as a means to warm myself up before the work days, as I typically would do them as soon as I woke up. But the thing is, the exercises in particular that are meant to target the thyroid gland and help cure them from any issues, I'd say those were some of the most effective methods as a means to prevent any further problems from occurring, let alone curing the ones that were currently present. Finally, there of course were the dietary changes, including the discontinuation of plastic vessels, as well as having more natural ingredients put together. They of course included having iodine-rich foods, as well as selenium and zinc, and various other nutrients necessary to support the function, as well as keep my metabolism levels in check. That way, I won't have to worry about any more issues like this down the line. So, I can happily say that leading up to October of 2024, the thyroid problems I had were fully cured off, thanks to the many practices of FitTuber himself. But moving on to everything else I've had to do for July, September, and August of 2024, there of course were trips. One of the biggest I might have had throughout this whole decade was Orlando. Yes, Universal, Disney, and we initially planned to do SeaWorld, but unfortunately couldn't quite make the cut. And I feel like that the answer to that is maybe not worth discussing here, for a number of reasons. But I will at least say that given the context of Universal and Disney, they more than made up for this small loss. And I'm sure in the future, we might then be able to have a trip to SeaWorld, but otherwise, I will say Orlando 2024 might have been the best one that we've done so far. And you guys might remember, if you were long-term fans of my content, that I had a trip to Orlando just as well in 2017. But there we spent more time with Disney than we did with Universal. And it was kind of more equal in a way. We primarily stuck to Universal though for the latest issue of Orlando. But this doesn't mean that it was free from any problems. Because first off, Tropical Storm... Tropical Storm Debbie, I should say. I feel like that's enough already, but we could probably go a little bit further than that though, because it turns out we caught a bit of the southern flu. I feel like that's just more of a slang term used to describe certain sickness that's mostly apparent in the southern states. So whether this is a true thing or not, it's something that we ended up enduring throughout the last day and a half or so of our trip, and Even leaving behind Universal, going to Planet Hollywood, and spending the last few hours of our trip in Disney Springs for the second time, as opposed to the first time in which that we spent pretty much a whole day there. The thing is, our trip was indeed jam-packed full of some unique memories. And we spent a good amount of time in Universal, leading us to have Transformers, Revenge of the Mummy, E.T., Men in Black, The Simpsons, Spider-Man, and even the Incredible Hulk and the Velocicoaster, all up there. And I will say that I can confirm in August of 2024, leading up to today, the Jurassic Park River Raft experience definitely needs to be advantaged. They definitely need to update it to the point in which that they could probably work with what they already got in California. I mean, Jurassic World River Raft Adventures, that's already a thing. And I will say the Indominus Rex animatronics are the best. I couldn't make this up even if I wanted to. So what if they brought all that to Florida? Is that too much to ask? Well, you know what though? I will say that if I had to pick one true highlight from the entirety of that trip, it would have to be the one day that we spent in Disney's Hollywood Studios. Yes, a 15-hour long part of our trip was all put together for Disney's Hollywood Studios. We basically made a drive to Hollywood Studios just before 6 a.m. and were among the first to enter into the park because we had a special pass that allowed us to have early access. And we made a sprint all the way to Star Wars Land, the Galaxy's Edge as it's also referred to as. But what we have to say here is that Galaxy's Edge might just be one of the best things about Disney as of recently. Because apart from all the Avatar stuff that I also hear that they've been doing, as well as the unfortunate closure of a few attractions, including Dinosaur, which I heard happened just a couple months ago, Galaxy's Edge is by far the best thing about Disney. And all those people thought that Star Wars was doomed. No, man. The latest trilogy is just the appetizer for the main course. Or maybe I'll just put it this way. If the appetizer was a not-so-good salad that the chefs put together in a quick amount of time, Galaxy's Edge, Mandalorian, and everything else that Star Wars has nowadays, with all the shows, animated stuff, and etc., they are the entirety of an expensive, luxurious, full-course meal. The main, sides, drinks, desserts, everything else is all Star Wars Galaxy's Edge and beyond. So, the attractions that they had on board, including Rise of the Resistance, as well as a Millennium Falcon simulator, amongst many other things to do around the area. There, of course, were a number of meet and greets that we had, including Mandalorian and BB-8, a few photos in which that we have actually gotten a hold of. I will say, they were a pretty big part of the whole trip just as well. A ton of meet and greets. I swear, just the Disney part alone was just meeting up with a bunch of characters. But anyways though, Disney has a ton more to offer now than they probably did 10 years ago. And knowing the fact that there of course was a new Universal park known as Epic Universe, I will say, we definitely aren't finished with everything just yet. And of course, we do have to say, the next time we go to Orlando, which could be in the next few years or so, we just might have many more things worth talking about just as well. So, maybe I'll have another trip in mind for the future, but we just don't quite see that happening yet, at least for a while. So, I feel like I've talked about enough already here, but that's not to say that it's over yet, because we do have one more quarter of 2024 worth discussing right here. So, apart from the trips, the thyroiditis, the rail fanning, video games, movies, and all that stuff, we still got more for 2024. So, Make sure to like, subscribe, comment, follow me wherever you can find me, and stay on the Hollywood side if you want to see more on this channel.